All right, so this starts what is going to be tissues number 6. This one is fairly short because it looks at an area of the body that we go into for weeks and weeks at the end of the school year, and that's the nervous tissue. So when we look at nervous tissue, we look at nervous tissue as being two separate structures, okay? Most students, if we talk about nervous tissue, understand neurons or the nerve. And the second one is called the neuroglia. And neuroglia are all the helper cells, the supporting cells that are there to insulate, nourish, get rid of waste, everything else that is to make sure that a cell can function properly is done by neuroglia, the helper cells. Neurons themselves, which are in both of these pictures at the bottom, most of you should remember that there's a cell body, that inside that cell body has a nucleus, that there are dendrites and an axon. Dendrites are what receive a signal. The signal then moves through the dendrites to the cell body, from the cell body to the axon. The signal then travels down the axon to the next individual nerve or to the next cell that's receiving the signal. From neural tissue, we move into membranes, and we talked about membranes earlier in the year. We've dealt with serous membranes, we've talked about cutaneous membrane, and we've talked about mucous membranes. The only one that's new here is synovial membrane. So with membranes, they're all made up of epithelial tissue. So remember, epithelial is everything from simple squamish through transitional. And all of these epithelial layers are attached to a connective tissue layer, or the lamina propria. And we're going to briefly discuss each of these tissues. So the first one that we look at is a mucous membrane, and mucous membranes create mucus. So we'll find this in the mouth, inside the nose. We'll find it for females around the vaginal opening, and then for both males and females around the anus. Anywhere that the body is going to secrete a mucus substance to make sure that we're not getting bacteria into the body. These cells are held together by many, many tight junctions. Remember that tight junctions prevent any movement of fluids between the cells. And these membranes are very moist and wet. The cells themselves will vary within the epithelial tissue. They're not of any one grouping. And we see that they are allowing absorption and secretion. So most of these tissues are simple. And we'll see them, like I said, in the mouth and in the nose. Anything that is the gastrointestinal tract, respiratory tract. We will also be able to see them where some of them are made up of stratified squamish or simple columnar. So these aren't just simple squamish. We see them in multiple areas of the epithelial tissue. The second one is going to be serous membranes, and this is one we talked about with the pleura and the pericardium and the peritoneum. They line the body cavities and that do not have direct opening to the outside world. They cover almost all of the organs of the body. They consist of two layers. Remember, a parietal and visceral layer. Parietal layers are against the outside wall, so against usually the abdominal wall, thoracic cage. The visceral layer is against the organ. This is made up of simple squamish epithelium, a very thin layer, and these layers help with secretion and absorption, mainly with secreting a lubricating fluid, serous fluid, that helps to reduce friction. The third in the group is called synovial membranes, and synovial membranes are the membranes that create the joint cavities, or the capsule that is for the joints. This is the only group of the four membranes that is not epithelial cells, and they are predominantly going to be more of what is going to be the connective tissues. And synovial membranes, if we think about the capsule that is from each phalange holding together, or your knee joint, your shoulder. They're all created by a synovial capsule, and then that cavity inside has synovial fluid in it that is a lubricating fluid to make sure that the joint moves within its full range of motion. The fourth one is cutaneous membranes, and cutaneous membranes are alluding to your skin. So this is the two layers, that is the epidermis and the dermis. Remember from med term that the hypodermis is not a portion of your skin. We talk about it with skin, but it's not a portion of your skin. So the epidermis is going to be keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And remember, keratin is the waterproofing protein. So this helps repel water absorption through the skin. And then the dermal layer is actually going to be made up of two separate connective tissue layers. We have both the areolar and the dense irregular tissue together in the dermis. And this helps to create a cushion and tough barrier to try to prevent bacteria and stuff from getting inside the body. We move on to tissue repair, and with tissue repair, because we're going to be doing this in every single chapter, just some brief overview pieces. First, anytime we have tissue that's damaged, we're going to have inflammation. And the inflammation is doing everything it can to isolate the damaged tissue and then clean out all the dead cells and the excess fluid. Remember, that's being done by the lymphatic system. So we talked about lymphatic connective tissue. And we look at some basic definitions. So first, that an infection is anytime we have the presence of a pathogen, and that necrosis is the death of cells or tissues due to damage or infection. That if we see that pus is created, pus is the debris or fluid or dead or dying cells that are created from the damaged infection. And that an abscess is once we have an accumulation of that pus and it's ready to be expelled from the tissue to the outside world. Anytime we have cells that are going to try to repair themselves, we see that that alludes to the regeneration rate. And regeneration is purely the replacement of the damaged cells and or damaged tissue. And every single tissue in the body does this at a slightly different rate. Epithelial tissue, which there are 8 of those, we see that epithelial tissue regenerates very quickly. Connective tissues, which there are 13 of, they do not regenerate quickly at all. They actually, many of them don't regenerate at all. And so if you damage most connective tissue, they're only replaced by scar tissue. Muscle tissue, skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. All 3 of those, if we damage them, they are permanently damaged. I think I gave you the example with skeletal muscle. Think about the next time that you're going to have a hamburger. Get out a needle and thread and try to sew the hamburger back together. That would be like trying to sew your individual muscles together. And have the ability to regenerate for the most part. And so we see that each of these tissues regenerates at a different rate. Restoration just means the replacement of destroyed tissue. Fibrosis is that scar tissue that is created when we replace it by dense fibrous connective tissue. And then adhesions are the result of that scar tissue formed from one tissue to another, and so then it reduces the ability of the movement of those tissues. This is the end of tissues.